Moin und herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Folge SEO Presso. Mein Name ist Björn Darko und heute spreche ich mit Jordan Koene. Dieser Podcast wird auf Englisch stattfinden. Wir sprechen über SEO in 2022. Wir sprechen auch über das letzte Google Core Update und was Jordan bereits analysieren konnte. Und SEO Presso wird euch präsentiert von Searchmetrics und Searchmetrics bietet eine SEO- und Content-Plattform, die es Unternehmen ermöglicht, Erfolg datenbasiert planbar zu machen und Online-Marketern dabei hilft, ihre Ziele auch wirklich zu erreichen. Und wenn ihr mehr über Searchmetrics erfahren wollt, dann besucht den Blog blog.searchmetrics.com und die Webseite Searchmetrics.com und nicht vergessen, den Podcast abzuabonnieren, SEO Presso auf Spotify und Soundcloud und oder abonniert SEO.presso auf IGTV und Instagram. Let us start with a personal story. I mean, when you've been global head of SEO at eBay, I think there wasn't a time when eBay was super relevant e-commerce player, right? It was a great time to be there. Tell me, how was it to be alive and how was it to be an SEO for such a huge global brand at that time?
You know, I'm super grateful to have had that opportunity. It allows you to learn at a very different scale, right? Because you're dealing with challenges that come at you from so many different angles, verticalized angles, right? Like different industries or verticals like fashion versus automotive, to international global ones. How do you deal with a multi-language, multinational platform and experience? And then above all else, you know, you're still fighting through the efforts of innovation. Like how does this company stay relevant, innovative, and produce an experience and content that is not only useful for the users, but ultimately for consumers who are coming from Google, right? Because that was my goal and my job as the global head of SEO.
And funny enough, like, you know that I've been working for an auction platform as well in Switzerland, where eBay never ever had a chance to enter the market. Such a tiny market, by the way.
Hey, Switzerland has a history of really defending itself very well. So,
but you know, I've been working in Switzerland for an auction platform, and we had actually the same issues as you, right? So we had to deal with fraud. We had to deal with how do we scale our landing pages? How do we put content on there, etc. pp. And funny enough, last month I was talking to the new head of SEO at eBay and asked him, what are the goals of the strategy? You know, what are you facing currently? And funny enough, it has changed since I was actually responsible for an auction platform and since you. How do you see SEO for especially e-commerce has evolved since you've been out of eBay?
I think that the big piece of news that I think any of our listeners or really anybody in a hyper competitive market should be aware of is that, you know, authority on its own isn't enough, right? I say that even when I was at eBay, and largely still to this day, you know, the de facto Amazon belief in many markets is kind of the running expectation, right? It's that if you search for any product, you expect to see Amazon, right? Like you expect to have Amazon show up. And my belief in what's changing is that that's no longer going to be true. That Google has really stepped up their game and their ability to distinguish authority at such a granular topic level that Amazon by themselves will not be the default. That Google will prioritize that small French village seller and figure out that guy is super relevant and super important to certain personas and certain users, and thus surface that result above Amazon, which is crazy to think because, I mean, you know, for especially in the e-commerce world and especially in the United States, but in many other, you know, developed countries where Amazon exists as well, it is expected that Amazon is number one. But that'll change.
And I think, I don't know the exact number, but I think it's 54% of product searches is driven by Amazon, and it's a majority, and there's less product searches on Google. And I think especially with the announcement that Google now offers product listing ads for free, which certainly adds another dimension to SEO as well, is actually an announcement which goes into the direction, okay, how can we make sure that we don't lose too much track here, right?
Right. But that's a smart move by Google, right? Because product listing ads for a long time were not a source of traffic that Amazon would compete in. They deliberately avoided product listing ads. Now they do play in there now, not all categories. They're not holistically in product listing ads or shopping ads as they call them now. Google is now really leveraging this very powerful asset to improve their recognition as a product search engine. And I think it makes a ton of sense. Think about that. Think about the power of Google being able to say, you know what? Forget the revenue. We're not going to try to keep making money off of this. We're going to start giving it away for free because we believe so much in our ability to show product results.
Mm-hmm. And I'm also convinced that with the growth of voice search especially, and also if you consider that Amazon with Alexa has this huge marketplace in the background where, I can buy stuff on Alexa when I say, hey, I need diapers because they already knew based on my history which diapers and which size I need. And Google doesn't have this marketplace. So what they need is a backbone of products to allow the user through the Google Home or through the Google Assistant to buy. I already saw like bits and pieces of it when it comes to visual search, when you use the Google app and you try, I can take a picture of your running shoes and it would show me relevant products, which is based on the product listing ads. And I think that's also a preparation towards voice search and for the Google Assistant to, give product feedback to the user when they are saying, hey, I want to buy new Nike Air Max, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think this is the interesting piece, right, Bjorn, which is that there is this very unique strategy that Google is going with in terms of the e-commerce category. And one of them is the direction at which they're coming after and attacking the overarching experience, which is through like shopping ads or more integrated ways to personalize the shopping experience. And then on the other side, it's how do we become hyper local and hyper personalized? So like where we started the conversation, where Google is actually showing the very small retailer over Amazon. If Google can do both of these things, they can recapture a new market share in the shopping experience that Amazon probably can't compete in because they can't do the latter. They can't show the local seller in Amazon, but Google can.
But today we also want to speak about the, SEO in 2021. And I think there was just last week a big announcement where this is a former in-house SEO as well, never deploy on a Friday. And what has Google done? Released just before Christmas.
And on a Friday. Exactly.
Against all rules. We were exchanging emails over the weekend. You did some analysis. What is Google preparing for towards 2021 with this update?
There's two components to this, right? There's the component which is what is Google doing to get ready for 2021. But then there's also kind of the backdrop of what's recently happened. And so I think both of these components are really important to this narrative, which is, especially here in the United States, we're just coming off of an election, right? So early November, the US presidential election occurred. And I have a strong belief that Google in this December update was really untangling some of the key protective measures that they had in the search engine due to the election. And so I think they were trying to really avoid misinformation. They were over-indexing on authority of websites. They were over-indexing on, say, diversity of user input. So what I mean by that is websites that have a high degree of UGC influence, whereas user like you or I can go on and publish content, were likely being deprioritized, even though in probably many cases, those were great experiences for users, for the end Google user. Google wanted to reduce their risk because of the election. And so that's one component to this update that I believe is certainly true. The other piece to this as we get ready for 2021 is the concept of authority and quality content, right? Google always been touting the quality content story. And as we move more into 2021, what Google is going to be looking at is how do sites not only technically execute and publish this content, but is it done in a way that is authentic to the user? So what I mean by that is, are there duplicate listings of this exact same content? Does this page actually have a clear signal as to the result or the output that a user should have. Example, does this product page actually have inventory that can be sold, or is it an out of stock page, right? Seems like a very simple concept. When you permeate that across tens of thousands or millions of pages, that becomes a really poor experience, and Google's not going to like that about your website. And so those are the kinds of notions around quality content that Google is likely really analyzing.
So you're saying it always goes back also to the EAT discussion we had, like expertise, authority, and trust, which from my perspective is kind of a pattern through all those core updates, like the recent core updates, the last 2, 3, 4 core updates, always actually the same goal. And you also see that because some sites which have dropped by the last update, they put a lot of effort into fixing that, and they now gained a lot of visibility again, right? So EAT, a big part of it, like especially for if you look at different industries, how could you compare from your perspective? How could you, as an e-commerce, health, insurance business, prepare for this?
Yeah, so I think that for certain verticals and certain categories like health, medical, and say informative, like very informative type websites, the really critical component here is around the trustworthiness of this content. Is your content backed up by a doctor and an author that is a true, genuine human being that Google can validate and can see that there's other content or publications or things out there about this person? Or is this just some static, redundant, automated piece of content about this health topic or about this insurance topic? Google is really now leveraging a lot of the signals that are critical to the trustworthiness of a piece of content. And it's no longer sites who are able to just publish mass volumes of content. They're actually looking at very specific data points within a piece of content, like who the author is, what links are pointing to this. Is this a page that has references? Does this page actually reference material like a Wikipedia article or a study from a university? Like, are those elements existing on this page? And if they are, your trust score bumps up.
But that's pretty easy. Another pattern which goes through all those recent core updates is also the topic of usability. And not only the leak of the so-called playbooks, which, by the way, I don't think it was a leak. It was published on purpose. But this, and the announcement that from May onwards, we have the core web vitals, which clearly, play into this whole UX thing as well. Do you think that this is something Google will further concentrate on as well?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought this up, because if I'm making a bet on 2021, the number one place that Google is going to invest in the next year is in the connection of authority type KPIs to performance. Because Google knows full well that a website where a user has a higher degree of trust will ultimately result in a different set of activities and engagement. And I think that is where it all really kind of comes together, is when you have a super performant website, a really well-structured, well-designed, well-performing site, and the content has high trust, high authority, high engagement. And so Google is looking to understand how those two things interplay. And what I would anticipate in the first quarter of the year is to see some really clear statements from Google, which, by the way, they become much more vocal than they ever have in the past about updating the community, which is great. But they're going to come out with a lot of updates around core web vitals and how those should be measured, how those should be analyzed, how those should be integrated into these playbooks. And then they're going to be coming out with ultimately guidance around what Google is looking at in terms of this connection between content quality and then the performance of it. Because it's no longer the easy KPIs that we used to talk about. Things like time on site, right? Things like click-through rate, so impression to click-through rate. It's gone way past that and into, say, funnel-based KPIs. It comes into play now in terms of the third quadrant, which is the rank position to click ratio of these listings, because those all are really much more difficult KPIs to calculate. but really they're ultimately the signal of genuine user experience.
How would you say that SEOs need to prepare themselves, or what needs to change in the mindset of an SEO to be prepared for 2021?
2021 and beyond, right? The first one is SEOs need to start becoming far more granular about the data that they're measuring when it comes to performance. So let me give you an example, right? A lot of the really sophisticated SEOs that I know today, they have certain URLs that they are tracking for core web vital KPIs. First contentful paint or whatever. There's the 3 core web vitals, but then there's also derivatives of that. And people are tracking those at a URL level. Well, that makes a lot of sense when you're only thinking about yourself, right? When you're thinking about your own website. But that's not how Google looks at the landscape. Google looks at, well, what are all the URLs ranking for this? And what's the statistical averages against all of these KPIs? So how do you start to measure at that level? How do you actually take a keyword and translate it into core web vital KPIs so that you can actually understand what the market is doing, what users are doing, what the expectations are for that? And so what I mean by measuring things at a more granular level, when you're thinking about your own website, you need to start thinking about, how is a specific button, or how is a specific menu, or how is a specific link service or link pack on my page working and engaging with users? And is it actually working? Is it actually yielding beneficial results, not only as a comparative to the page itself, but to the market, to the other URLs that are ranking for these keywords that this page ranks for? How do you understand that level of granularity? Because that's where Google's at now. Google doesn't just look at a URL and evaluate it. Google looks at experiences, data points inside of a URL, inside of a page. They're dissecting the body section of a page and really understanding what's happening at that level. And that's where you need to be as an SEO. You need to be telling your engineers, fix this button because it doesn't create the same amount of engagement as our other pages and as our competitors. Sounds super nitpicky, sounds super granular, but if you want to be competitive, that's the level you need to be playing at.
It's so funny because on the one side, Google is forcing us to build better website, increase the user engagement, make it more useful. On the other side, they do a lot to keep the user on the SERP, right? And you know those case studies from Brent Fishkin, for example. I think the last one said that more than 50% of the users stay at Google and don't go on any other website. Are you seeing this increasing in the next year as well? And how should marketers prepare themselves for getting a larger footprint in the SERP?
I do believe that Google's going to continue to push that. I do believe that Google's going to push harder on featured snippets, rich results. They're going to be embedding new experiences around carousels, around different ways of surfacing content within the SERP. And I think that they're going to start getting down to an industry level, right? Because if you think about this from a logical standpoint, it's one thing to do this for an entire market, a market being like the news industry, all having to adapt to AMP so that Google can show content in new experiences, right? That's a market level. But at an industry level, now what we're actually saying is that Google is going to take all car marketplaces, standardize the make, model, vehicle, mileage KPIs that exist for every single car, and now surface car results in a very specific modular experience. That is an industry level. And now that becomes wildly difficult for an SEO to unpack, because the SEO needs to understand, how do I send signals at an individual vehicle level, right? Because it's just one single car. And how do I prioritize them? How do I determine that this Volkswagen with this many miles from this year is the best one to send to Google? That's hard, but that's where great SEOs are going to be able to unlock tons of traffic, because that's where Google's going to go. And yes, those experiences keep users on Google, but they keep users on Google in a certain intent level. What I mean by that is, until the user knows that they want to perform the activity, until the user actually knows that they have found what they want, the user's not going to click. And that's what Google's trying to avoid. Google's trying to avoid fatigue in users who search and search and search and search and search over and over and over again because they're not finding what they want. So what is Google trying to do is reduce that fatigue by improving the experience keeping users on Google, but when they found the result, Google's not blocking them. Google's saying, okay, go. Now you found what you want. Go.
By the way, it's okay. You just said Volkswagen, but you can also name a great American car company. You don't need to say Volkswagen.
I don't know if one of those exists. I mean, I guess there's Tesla, but you know.
I thought I just read that Elon Musk wants to move to Texas, and
that's right.
He's just building a huge fabric here in Berlin, right?
That's right. He is. That is correct. Smart move.
Probably it's becoming a German car brand.
Pretty soon. I mean, I'm pretty sure it was already half German when it started because it worked way too well for it to be American.
Hey, last question I have, and we shouldn't have a year prediction without the topic of voice search, right? And everything you just said, like we touched on featured snippets, reducing this fatigue and bringing users the direct answer to the problem. I also see that a big preparation for voice search and voice assistance as well, because especially everything which you see in the SERP feature is a feedback Google is using to get back to the user.
Correct.
Through an assistant, right? Even though, all those predictions about, 40% of all searches will be voice driven, etc., pp, didn't came through in this year. But how do you see next year this trend evolving?
I think that assisted search, voice being one of those assistants, right? There are many others now, which that I think a lot of people take for granted. Many of them are voice enabled, but there's even now going to be TV assistants, right? Because all of our TVs are smart TVs. I've been making this prediction for now almost half a decade since Samsung came out with their Family Hub refrigerator, that even refrigerators will be assistants, right? Yes. Because refrigerators will have certain data points and KPIs about how much milk you have left and how many eggs you have and what kind of cheeses do you have in the refrigerator, so that when you're at the store, you just pull up your phone and go, yes, I have no Parmesan cheese. You didn't even have to open the refrigerator. Your refrigerator just told you, right?
Amazing.
That's an assistant. That is an assistant. And I don't think that it's all about voice. Voice will certainly become one of the largest ones, hands down. But these assistant-enabled searches are where Google knows the market is going. That is, Google knows that the text-based search that we all do on our computer, that stuff's going to go away. And there's going to be all these signals that are going to be sent to us, and we're going to be able to make really good decisions off of that. In 2021 specifically, where I see this evolving, I do see that there's going to be a further investment in Google's voice capabilities. I would expect there to be the ability to do more refined searches through voice. So for example, I made this prediction for 2020, but it didn't really ever come true, but I do think it will very soon, which is you do a voice search, such as, hey, Google, tell me the 10 best Thai restaurants in Berlin. And then Google sends you results back saying, hey, Jordan, these are the 10 best, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And then they ask you a question like, would you like to place an order? And then Google gives you the options of the Thai restaurants that allow you to take voice-enabled orders, and Google's reciting to you the menu or the most favorite items from there. And it's interesting because when you do restaurant-based searches today, you actually start to see some of these data points show up. You start to see menus show up. You start to see hours show up. You start to see what kind of delivery services and what kind of pickup services that these restaurants offer. And all of those are key signals to a voice refinement search query. Right.
Absolutely,
and so the prediction here for 2021 is that Google will allow more refinements in voice searches. So being able to navigate further into your search and into what your intention is, right? Well, why did you ask this question? And then that will also then require many websites and webmasters to become very prescriptive about what data they're providing. I think one of the worst experiences is a voice experience where you don't know why the data is wrong, right? Because you can't see it, you can only hear it. And how frustrating is that for a user? And so I think that I can give you a great example of that. If you ever use the voice dictation for writing, right? Like to take a note or something, you can see when the word is misspelled faster than the system can fix it, right? Yeah. That's what it feels like. Just think about not being able to see the screen when you're doing the voice dictation. That's what it feels like when there's a bad voice search result set. But in any case, I also think the other big prediction here around voice or assisted search is that Google will become much more prescriptive in their requirements about data. So you will see Google and the Google Webmaster team really come down on what data needs to be shared with them in order for them to make these experiences work.
It's a great example, especially I have an Alexa at home. And what Amazon does, if you want to purchase something, you say, hey, I want to buy X, right? What they do is they exactly give you the search result page. If you would do the desktop search or mobile search on Amazon directly, they give you the search result page back, and then they take the advertisement on the top, recommended, and then they take the first search result. And what they give you as a feedback is the title plus the product ID number, which is Alexa is reading it out. And I say, what the fuck? I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Right. And so back to your point, exactly. So it needs like the data which is provided needs to be really, really good quality. It needs to be descriptive and written in a way that it can be a feedback, like a verbal feedback to a user without all those, hieroglyphics.
Exactly. And Google's getting really smart about also giving you the subsequent search, right? So you do a search to buy something with a voice-enabled Alexa. The first result set back to you shouldn't be number 1, number 2, number 3. It should be, hey, Bjorn, would you like the cheapest eggs? Would you like organic eggs? Would you like a dozen or 18 eggs? Like what? They give you options, and then you as the buyer go, oh, I'd like the cheapest organic eggs and I only need a dozen. And now Google can say, hey, these are your 3 options. Would you like them delivered tomorrow? Right? Like that is allowing the user to do the same math that we do in the grocery store, but do it in a voice enabled way. None of the systems are there yet, but we will see progress in this throughout 2021.
Yeah, so that it ends more into a conversation. And I really like the conversation with you, Jordan. Thank you very much to be on my podcast.
Absolutely.
It's been an honor. And hopefully we will see us back in Berlin or in San Francisco and can do one of our walks again. Thank you, Jordan.
Absolutely. Take care.